Hi, I'm John with the Christian Century, and I'm joined today by my favorite Voices columnist for our magazine. Don't tell the other columnists, but it is Debie Thomas. And Debbie wrote an article for our December issue. The Feeling I No Longer Pray For is the name of the piece. We're going to chat about that, about prayer and theology. But before we dive in, Debbie, why don't you tell us a little bit more about who you are?
Sure. So, yes, I'm a columnist for the Christian Century. I also serve as a minister of lifelong formation at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Palo Alto, California. Um, I live here in the Bay Area with my husband. We have two kids who are all grown up. And so I kind of divide my time between writing and serving in the church.
Very cool. Well, glad we could chat.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
in this article, in the beginning, you talk about looking back at old prayer journals. And it sounds like the prayer life you're describing is one where you are praying for to feel something, to feel God's presence, and maybe that's not happening or not happening often. And so you say that prayer journals are tear stained. And I
Mhm.
just wondered if you could tell us a little more, looking back, what were you praying for, and what was causing those emotions that you were feeling?
Sure. So I grew up in a tradition that placed a very high value on kind of affective experience in prayer. So you should, feel God's arms around you. You should feel God's love in a very tangible, palpable way. And that was not my experience most of the time when I'd pray. And and I think I internalized that like something's wrong with me. I must not have enough faith. I'm not using the right words. Maybe there's unconfessed sin in my life, so God is sort of blocked from being close to me. Um, and so there was this constant sense of yearning, but then disappointment that this emotional roller coaster experience, this mountaintop experience I was supposed to have, was not panning out. And so there were a lot of tears, a lot of just sadness and feeling shame or feeling bad that I must be doing prayer wrong. I'm not getting it right.
I know I can relate from when I was a teenager. That's the kind of faith tradition I think I was into, and
Mm-hmm.
it's tough. So in the middle of the piece, you describe a pretty big shift that seems to have been a breakthrough in your kind of journey with prayer and faith, and
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the way you view God and God's presence. And thinking through the jargony lens of being a seminary grad, I was thinking of it read to me almost like a shift from a more classical theism to maybe like a panentheism or something. And I
Mm-hmm.
just whether or not you want to use those words. Could you tell us a
Sure.
little more? Like, what was it you used to view God to be, and then
Mm-hmm.
how did that change over time?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a fair shift. I think, you know, many church traditions land on a limited number of metaphors or images for God and just stick with just those. So, the common ones that I grew up with, they were God as Father, God as Shepherd, God as Friend. In youth group, there was that sort of Jesus as boyfriend or, like lover kind of language. And I took all of that very seriously. We did not so much hear the language of God as present in all things, God as the ground of our being, God as being the one in whom we live and move and have our existence. That was not language that I grew up with at all. It was there, but it was never highlighted in sermons or in Bible study. And so I approached God as I would a person, only. And so when God didn't respond the way a human friend responds, or a boyfriend responds, or a parent responds, I thought again something is wrong. I'm doing something wrong. So I think the shift came in terms of just expanding my language for God, conceptions of God, images, metaphors for God, um, beyond just the anthropomorphic. Um, those metaphors are there for a reason. They have value too, but that's not all. God is not just a bigger version of a human dad or friend or shepherd or any of those kinds of metaphors.
Yeah. So in the end of the article, you kind of talk a little bit about how the shift in your theological perspective has changed your prayer life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really fascinated by this one phrase. You said that you are learning to experience God's presence in all things, even in God's apparent absence.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like, how are you doing that? Can you share your secret with the rest of us? How can you experience God's presence even in the midst of what appears to be God's absence?
Yeah, I think it's really just changing my default setting. For so much of my life, my default setting was God is somewhere out there. God is distant, God is far away. And by my sheer like effort of piety and prayer and purity and goodness, I can draw God close for a certain amount of time. I kind of earn that. And then God sort of disappears again. So shifting the default has been no, I choose instead to affirm and sort of, I guess, existentially trust that God is always present. It's not a back and forth. God is always present. In my human limitation, my ability to perceive or to bask in that might change. That's just a fact of human psychology. Like, it's who I am. But the fact of God's closeness, that's a given. And I have to, I guess, just take that. I've decided to take that on faith, to just affirm that the way I affirm, I don't know, the existence of the moon. Like, it just is. And then if I start from there, then everything shifts because I don't constantly have to be wondering, is God mad at me? Why am I not feeling God? So it's become, I guess, less about my feelings than just what I've chosen to affirm and take as like the default setting, the baseline truth.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm sure we could talk much more about this, but you write columns for us regularly, so we could have even more chats.
That'd be great.
Thank you so much for chatting today,
Of
Debie.
course.
For anyone out there who would like to read more of Debie's work, below in the video description, you will find not only the link to this article that we've been chatting about, but also Debie's website where you can read about her book, Into the Mess and Other Jesus Stories. Thanks so much again, Debie. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, John.